Today I'm going to make a ground beef and cauliflower casserole. Cauliflower is there to replace any pasta you would have used, and therefore makes it a lot less calorie dense, a lot less carbs, sugars, keep your blood glucose pretty level. I got the idea from a vlogger named Dodger who had mentioned it briefly in her show, and I thought I'd give it a try. So we have some ingredients here. It's not a whole lot to have to do with it. It's fairly simple to set up and start. Ingredients wise, you'll need some extra lean ground beef, about a pound, some pasta sauce. I chose one that had no sugar added. I've never tried it before, so we'll see. Some spinach. If you have some wilting in the fridge that's fresh, use that, but I'm going to use frozen. Some white onion, garlic, mushrooms, a head of cauliflower, and optional garnishes are olives and some sort of cheese. I'm using Romano. As far as tools go, you'll need a knife to cut things up, a big pot for the cauliflower to boil in, and a pan big enough to brown the ground beef and add the onion and garlic to it. The first step will be to brown the ground beef and start the cauliflower boiling. So I'm going to chop up the cauliflower and get the beef in the pan. So I have the ground beef in a pan, browning, and I have the cauliflower in a pot getting ready to boil. So to brown the ground beef, if you don't know, you just sort of keep it moving around. I'm using a silicone spatula, so it's very heat resistant and it doesn't scratch the bottom of my pan. And I'm just keeping it moving around, keeping it broken up. But while I'm browning the hamburger, so I don't waste too much time, I'm going to get the onion, garlic, and mushrooms ready. Now I already have my onions chopped because I tend to go through a lot of onions in my house, so I thought I'd think ahead and chop a bunch at the same time. So just chopped about that size, you can see. Boom. So I'm going to get that ready, and then I'm able to proceed. Now, what I would recommend if you wanted to make this, let's say, a slow cooker crock pot recipe instead of using the stovetop, I would still suggest to brown the hamburger. I find if you just put it in, it gets really like almost gritty tasting. It just has a weird texture. As for the cauliflower, I would stick it in a blender or food processor and pulverize it until it's smallish chunks, and then throw all the ingredients in except for the onion and the ground beef. Throw it all in the slow cooker, and then once the ground beef is browned, you can put the onion in quickly, cook that up a little bit, and then everything can go in the slow cooker. I'm going to do mine on the stovetop, and we'll see how it goes. So my hamburger is now browned. Let's see it here. And because it's extra lean, I don't have to drain it at all. Any liquid coming out, there might be some fat, but it's going to also be a lot of water. So to that I'm going to add my onions and my mushrooms. Depending on what you like, between a half cup and a cup of onion. About that much. Now if you don't feel like chopping up onion and garlic, you can just use powder. Make your life a little easier. I like the fresher flavor of it. My mushrooms go in. Getting a little full in the pan here. And as for the garlic, I am garlic crazy, so I'm using a whole head of garlic, which might seem, a little too much for some people. I would say a normal amount of garlic for this recipe would be about 3 or 4 cloves. So I'm going to mix this in, chop up my garlic, and throw it in with it. Because you're going to have this simmering for a little bit after everything's together, you don't have to worry too much about cutting the garlic really small. You could mince it if you like, but the flavors are all going to mix together with the cooking time, especially if it's going into the slow cooker. Alright, so I'm going to add my ridiculous amount of garlic into this. stir it up, and then just stir it every few minutes to mix it up. The pan I'm using is a little bit small for this, but it should be fine. Here we go, everything's all mixed in, and so I'm just going to wait for the cauliflower to be boiling, and then we'll be able to go on to the next step. So I'm ready for the next stage. My ground beef mixture is done, the onions are fairly transparent, and the cauliflower I have boiled and then drained, and then just used a potato masher to smash it into oblivion. So I'll show you each of those. Here's the cauliflower. If you wanted to, you could use a food processor or a ricer if you wanted a finer texture, but I just used what was handy. And here's my ground beef mixture. So now I'm just going to mix everything all together and let it simmer for a while. Ground beef going in. Sauce. I want to try it because I've never tried this stuff. No sugar added. And no weird other things either. Not bad. It's definitely less sweet, but that's okay. Add a bunch of spinach. I don't know. Half cup? Sure. Maybe a bit more. I like spinach. Between a half cup and a whole cup. And again, if there's vegetables in here that you don't like, or if you want to add more vegetables, it's pretty easy to just add to, be creative, do what you want. At this point I'm just going to add a little bit of salt and pepper and some hot sauce. If you don't want things spicy, you could omit it, but I just want a little bit of bite. I don't know. Ground beef is fairly salty anyways, and there's salt in the sauce, so I'm not going to add too much. People can add salt after if they wish. And a bunch of pepper. And a bunch of hot sauce. So the intention of this recipe is to have it so that you don't need to have a starch for your meal, but you'll still feel satisfied. You're not eating just a bunch of ground beef. Having said that, if you wanted to have, maybe you're working out, you're a little bit hungrier at dinner time, then by all means serve this over some macaroni or some whole wheat spaghetti. Okay, so now that it's consistently mixed, I'm just going to leave it on low on the stove, put a lid on it. I might add a little bit of water here and there depending on how long I want to cook it because it isn't super saucy. If you wanted a bit more wet sauciness, you can add more sauce or add canned diced tomatoes to it. I'm going to leave this like this for now. There you go, everything's mixed together. Looks pretty good. And I'm just going to leave it for a bit and we'll see how it is in about an hour. So I've let it simmer for about 45 minutes, and I did need to add some water to it so it didn't get too thick and stick to the bottom and burn the pot. I'm going to try it now, but I think I'll also let it keep simmering for a bit and see if the flavors improve. So I'll let you take a look at what I've made. So there it is, bubbling away. It's all good consistency, everything's nice and cooked. Just give it a little stir here. Okay. So we're going to give it a try. So I'll show you this. There's my food. Alright, here we go. Let's see if this turned out any good. Okay, well, it's really, really hot. Ooh, okay. It's good. It's got a good amount of bite. Actually, the cauliflower, you don't even really notice it. It has this somewhat similar texture to the ground beef and it just blends right in, so pretty vegetable. It's so hot. So I'd say the only thing maybe is I would add those diced tomatoes, but it doesn't need it, and it turned out pretty tasty, so I recommend you trying it. There you go. Enjoy.